So I have finally figured out how to do it. Create a stained glass effect using my 3D printer. Hey guys, it's Sarah, and welcome to my studio. So I apologize for the hiatus. I had a buffer of videos going and it kind of ran out, and it happened to coincide with me slipping my SI joint, which minus 10 out of 10 don't recommend doing. And then if things couldn't possibly get any, no, wait, I'm not going to throw that out into the universe. Things then got a little worse because I'm sure I've mentioned it on the channel before. This is my part-time job, and I actually work as a physician assistant in the hospital. And unfortunately, the network that I work for suffered a ransomware attack earlier this week and literally just kind of shut everything down. And I've been helping with my team and trying to get things at least somewhat up and running again. It's been an absolute nightmare, so I didn't really get to recording the footage I wanted to the past week. So I'm kind of doing this a little bit on the fly. I've had this project for a while now. It's something that I was kind of interested in doing. So quick backstory, and I'll leave a timestamp if you want to skip ahead just to the tutorial and all of that. But my undergrad is in fine arts, and one of the things we had to do before we specialized was that we had to work in various different fields. One of which was that we actually had to do a class on glass. Now we had the option of doing hot glass or cold cut glass, and I opted to do the cold cut glass because I have a tendency to get myself burned. Seriously, I was dumb enough the other day and touched one of my nozzle heads to clean it with my bare fingers. I don't know why I was dumb enough to do that. By the way, don't do that. With the cold cut glass, we got the opportunity to learn how you do stained glass, and that was something I really enjoyed. I was surprised about that. But I really struggled with adequately cutting glass. I don't know what it was. I just really struggled using the glass cutter. And my hope was that perhaps maybe someday I could play around with designs, but not have to deal with that process. Perhaps there would be an easier way to do it. And laser cutting, admittedly, will kind of get you in that ballpark, especially if you're working with acrylic rather than proper glass. For proper glass cutting, you're going to need to use, I think at minimum, a UV laser, and those are still not completely out on the market, at least for reasonable hobby makers. There have been some other projects that I've seen that are really cool related to 3D printing where you can create this glass effect. And it's really just a matter of figuring out how to do a frame. And I, after playing around with it for a while, figured out a way to do it so that it is actually a completely enclosed frame. So, and this actually will probably work not only for these 3D printed glass pieces that I created, but this would actually work with acrylic as well. I will leave a link to a video that I've done before where you can actually put acrylic and 3D printing together. 3D printing will actually stick to acrylic. So this project could be done with the glass pieces cut using a laser cutter. This run around, I'm going to show you guys how you can create glass looking pieces using your 3D printer. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that today. I'm going to show you guys using a much simpler design, but I'm going to show you guys how we go through this process, as well as how you get this really awesome glass looking effect. This is one of the various surface designs that you can do with 3D printing, as well as one of the fill-in patterns that you can use. So this is actually straight all the way through. And I'll show you guys all of this in Bambu Studio. So with that being said, let's get started. All right, so let me show you how you set up a design so that it can be moved over into your 3D modeling software of choice to create your stained glass file. Unfortunately, I was having some recording problems with getting my screen to actually show you the menu so you can actually see what I'm clicking on clear up here. And so I had to re-record this again. So you're not actually seeing me design this file this time. Sorry, guys. I designed this over in Affinity Designer. I like working in Affinity, and especially because they have additional shapes that make it easy to kind of create neat designs. For instance, like this sun shape with the petals actually was created using the cogwheel tool and adjusting settings. And then I created this moon shape, and then just, of course, a standard circle. But one of the problems Affinity has is converting curves sometimes doesn't always do very well, and they don't have a simplify function on top of that, which can be problematic sometimes when I then want to take those vectors over to DXF, because really any errors with your vectors going into 3D modeling world is just kind of a mess. So I'm over here in Illustrator. It kind of resolves my problem. It frustrates me then because that's another monthly subscription, but I mean, It's a tool I need, so it's a tool I need. So anyway, so here's the design that I created. And I brought over really just the initial paths. So these are all actually paths. And then I have the stroke assigned to my design is actually 4 millimeters in width. This piece, you will, if I click off here and it's just in the board, you'll notice that I've got the document unit set to millimeters, because most of the time when you're working in 3D modeling and in 3D printing, you're working in millimeters. You can work in inches, but the standard is millimeters. So learning to kind of go back and forth is something you kind of just get used to. I do almost all my work in millimeters unless I'm trying to like estimate what size I need it to be. So I have my paths here. I've got this path, I've got the additional moon path, and I've got this circle path. First thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select all of them. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Object, Path, and then I'm going to do Outline Stroke. And what that does is it takes the path and it expands it to the entire width of the stroke. And then from there, I'm just going to merge all of the shapes together and you get one big design, this one big compound path that is my design. This is what I need to then model out and print. And I am going to take a moment to go Object, Path, Simplify, just to clean things up a little bit. If I bring up my little settings window here, you can see it went from 115 points all the way down to 51 points. So it eliminated a lot of points. And I mean, you can adjust things a little bit. For instance, like I lost some of my curvy points here with all of this. I'm going to go back in and fix that here shortly after I do the auto simplify. That's an easy thing to adjust. But everything else pretty much stays the same. It just did a little bit of cleanup, but that also eliminates any rogue points that were in places that maybe they didn't need to be. Then you can go in with the direct selection tool, and if there's anything you particularly want to adjust, you can do that. I actually think I kind of like that design. I think I'm going to leave it the way I have. The only thing I need to adjust is there's still a curve over here for some reason. So that's kind of interesting. So maybe I will go ahead and just kind of ever so slightly bring back a little bit of a curve on each of these. Nothing too major. There we go. And then everything else looks good. So this is my design. So this is what I want the border to look like. The lines, essentially the black lines, and all of these inside pieces are going to be my stained glass colored pieces. So what I need to do is I need to get the additional lines set up for all of the extruding and all of that in regards to how does this shape work. And it probably would make more sense if I kind of drew you guys an example. Let's play around with a new canvas. Let me explain things. So this is sort of a side profile of what it would look like. So you've got your stained glass pieces, and then you've got these edges, which is the border over here on the edges. This is what we're seeing here is this border. Is the idea is that we want this to be kind of laying up over a little bit on the stained glass, around the side and underneath. And yeah, I know this isn't to scale, but just kind of for example purposes. So what we need to do is we've got the black pieces, the top and bottom black pieces created. We need to set up lines for the side portions of the border. So what would be in between the two pieces of glass, as well as laying the lines for the glass themselves, because we don't want the glass to be cut exactly on this line. We want it to go in a little bit. That way all of the pieces fuse together nicely. And with 3D printing, the stained glass pieces, I find you also need to put just a little bit of space in between just to kind of accommodate. Basically, you need like a little bit of a curve. You know, when you're fitting two pieces together, cutting them the exact same size often doesn't work and it doesn't give you tight. So you have to kind of accommodate a little bit for that. So, and for mine, what I noticed is having an additional 0.2 millimeters on each side allows the pieces to set perfectly without them getting stuck, yet still fitting snugly enough that the design is secure and can continue to print. So what we need is to take this border, pull it out however much we want it to cover over the glass, and then an additional 0.2 millimeters so that we get the lines for the center frame in the middle. So if we go back over here, we're going to do that. So we have our design here, and what we're going to do is we're going to flip it so that we go from the inside being black to the exterior. These are the lines of the frame. And usually I will actually even shrink this down to like 0.25. I just need like a little barrier, just enough to see. Now to create the lines, the best tool that I found to use for that is the offset tool. So if you go to path, object, path, you go offset path, and you can control how far. Now this one decided it wanted to go out. And actually what I need it to do is to go a -0.6. There we go. So this is going in 0.6 millimeters, which I've done depending on the size of the stained glass, I've done anything from 0.4 to, 0.8. It really kind of depends a little bit on the design. This is enough to be, I don't need a ton covered. This is enough just to secure the glass in place. So I'm going to go with 0.6 and then click OK. And this gives me a new path. And this new path, I am going to set the color to red just so it's easier to see. I'll click off here. There you go. So you can see this path. Now, I just need the lines that are around the glass portions. I don't need this extra one here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on it, click on one of the spots, hit delete once and delete twice, and that line completely is gone. I don't need that. I also don't need this one. So there we go. Easy cleanup. So now we've got the black path, which is the top and bottom portions of the frame. We've got the red line, which is our glass layer. So now I need to offset them one more time, going out 0.2 millimeters. I find it works better to do and, eliminates errors and all of that if I use the original offset and just repeat the process rather than using the new offset. But rather than it being 0.6 millimeters, we're going to go out 0.8. It's that additional 0.2. We're going to click OK. And so that I can see the difference on this color, I'm going to make it sort of a blue shade. All right. And again, I don't need this line, so I'm going to delete that one. And I don't need this line, so I'm going to delete that one. There. Now I know it's a little hard to see, so let me zoom in to give you a better idea what's going on. So here you can see we've got the original frame, black, that you're going to see. Then you've got this blue, then you've got this red line, which is going to be where the glass pieces are cut. And then you've got this blue line, which is the frame, the black frame that's going to be in the center. The glass has a very small little space, and then there's this overlap. This, at this point, is all set and ready to go over to Shaper for modeling. I just need to export it. So I'm going to go into File, Export, Export As, and then I'm going to make sure, for me, I select DXF. You could, if you have software that will allow for it, you can do SVG. I'm going to save it out, make sure I remember the name, and then just click Export. And of course, it'll come up with all information, and you should be able to leave the default settings without being an issue, and then just click OK. And it's exported out, and I will be able to take this file over into Shaper and convert it to a 3D model that'll look like a piece of stained glass. So let me go show you how you do that. All right, so we're over here in Shaper, and we are going to go ahead and import that sketch, and hopefully everything will come in okay. So I'm going to click Add File, and I'm going to pull my DXF Sun Moon drawing, click Open, and voila, it comes in. Where it comes in on the axis, honestly, I don't know how Shaper decides, but I don't care. And these are 5 millimeters, so this is coming in exactly the size I need. So hopefully we should be able to extrude all of these shapes with minimal issue. So I'm going to kind of select all of them. I'm going to select faces, because I'm going to start by creating sort of my frame, and then I'll create my glass pieces. So do that, and then I'm going to shift click off my glass pieces, or these center pieces here that I don't need to be part of the frame. There we go. I'm going to move myself up here, and then I am going to extrude a frame thickness of 0.6 millimeters. And voila, we've got my frame. So this is going to be the bottom and the top. There's going to be 2 of them. So I'm just going to call this, I'm going to rename this one bottom frame. I'm going to hide it, and I'm going to make my drawing, because it always hides your drawing. I'm going to bring that back in. And now we're going to work on the second part, which is selecting the internal frame, which is just this one. So I've got this one, and this is going to be a height of 1.5 millimeters. That's also going to be the height of my glass. So if I do that and extrude it, I've got that. So this front is going to be my center frame. All right. And then I'm actually going to move my center frame up 0.6 millimeters. That way it will sit right on top of my bottom frame. And then I'm going to take my bottom frame, I'm going to make a copy of it, and I am going to move it up the 0.6 that is its depth, as well as the 1.5 that is the center depth. So 0.6 plus 1.5 is 2.1 millimeters. There we go. And I will rename this one to top frame. All right. And as you see, we've got all of that layered in, and you can even see how it's got this little inset on the inside where the glass pieces are going to fit. So I can take all of these and I can union them, and they union just fine. It becomes a bottom frame. You don't necessarily have to, though. If, in fact, I would actually recommend not unioning them, just because if you're ever having any problems and you need to go in and fix things, it's much easier to come back and fix them, and it's not really going to make a difference in the long run when you go and print it if they're like separate pieces on top of each other. I do recommend going ahead and grouping all of them into a folder and calling it your frame. Bambu Slicer, it's going to treat a folder of objects as kind of one thing together, sort of an assembly. So I do recommend doing that. So we've got my frame. Now we just need to get the glass pieces going. So to do that, we need to select them. And we're going to need this inside piece, and we're also going to need this piece here. So you go in and you're going to need to select all of them. I think that's all of them. Yep. All right. Now I should be able to extrude up 1.5, which is how thick I want the glass to be. And it extruded down because I had gotten myself looped around in space. But there we go. Those are all my glass pieces, all nice and extruded. So I'm going to take and I'm going to select all of my glass pieces. I'll put them in a frame or a folder, and I'm going to call them glass. Call it glass just to make things more organized. And then what I'm going to do, just to kind of show you guys how it looks, is I am going to actually move it up 0.6 millimeters. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and hide my drawing, and then I'll show you my frame. And you can see by looking at it that they fit in there just nicely. If I were to select my glass frame, aim and look at it from the top, you can see that there's this little bit of an edge. It's going in underneath it, whereas if I were to select my frame, if I were going there and select the center frame, you can see where that space is. And then if I were to add on to touching that silver frame and maybe say also bring in the glass, you can see how things are lined up. So there's that. Tap that one and say maybe that one. You can see how things line up really well. So that's how everything gets lined up and set up in Shaper 3D. I can play around if I want to try and come up with the design coloring here by going over from the modeling into visualization, which is kind of nice. So for instance, I've got my frame here. I'm going to set my frame to black. And then what I can do is I can actually, if I want to, I'm going to select glass. So I've got, different glass here that I can play with. I'm going to just pick glossy translucent glass, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it over all of my glass ones, but then I can go in and I can change the colors. I can pick individual glass bodies and I can play around with them. So like for instance, maybe I want this one to be a yellow, maybe I want this body to be white since it's the moon, but then maybe I want to like alternate and set these to orange, and perhaps I want the rest of these to be red. And then I can go back into modeling. Now you've got a better idea of what your stained glass would look like. So let's go ahead and get this exported. Okay guys, I have loaded my design over into Bambu Studio. And as you see, it came over, and of course it's going to default to whatever color I had going. I'm going to set this to black real quick. So now I have, and it came in right size from the looks of it. If I go to sizing here, it's coming in 143, 149 to 2.7 millimeters, which would be right. So everything loaded okay. So I'm going to create a new plate, move my frame over to the second plate. So that's over there. And then I've got my glass pieces. Now I can pick and color them however I want. So I'm going to just sort of control click these, and I'm going to add a different color. I'm going to pick a red, and I'm going to need to go in here and update things. Maybe I want thinking 4 or 5 different colors. So I'm going to set this one, yellow's fine. And then I'm going to set this one to an orange. Okay, so these are all going to be the ones that I've got selected. I'm all going to set to 2, or was going to set to 2. There we go. Set these to 2. I'm going to select the remaining ones. I'm going to set them to the 4th color. I'm going to set this one to 3. And then I'm going to set this one to 5, which I have set as blue, but it's probably going to be white. There we go. So now I need to prep this plate so that it will print all of them sort of by colors and objects. So I am going to kind of have it arrange those a little bit, and then I'm going to tell it that I want it to print by object. So it's thinking it wants to do all of these individually one at a time. What I'm actually going to do is go in and I'm going to grab all of my reds, and I'm going to merge my reds together. I'm going to bring all of my oranges together, and then these are all, and then what I can have it do is then arrange better like that. There we go. Did I miss an orange or nope, they're all together. You can if it seems like it's a weird combination, because sometimes I don't know what Bambu's thinking with the auto arrange. I can pick one of them and move them so that it is a little closer to the rest of its friends, so it's a little more organized. Or you can do this ahead of time before they become part of the group. Like for instance, what I can do is I can grab a new plate, can move that one out there, and then I can split to parts. I can have it auto arrange, bring all of those back together as an item. It's a little more organized, and then I'll be able to put it back. So I'm going to take my orange, move it back onto this plate, take my red bodies, move them out here, auto arrange so it makes a little more sense. Put those back over here. There we go. And I'll rename those just to be organized. And then I can tell my plate to organize. There we go. And then I don't need this plate anymore. So now those are all organized so that they will print one object at a time. So that will eliminate the number of colors changes. So it'll just like print the white, then it'll move on to the orange, then it'll move on to red, move on to yellow. So now I need to just set them up how I want to for stained glass. Now I have a print profile that I've already created. So I will leave this design in the description so that you guys can download it, and you should be able to then take and make and save your own settings from it. But let me show you what I've got set. So here I've got pretty much everything on, quality is the exact same. Where the changes come over mostly are over here in strength, and that's that I've got the top surface pattern as an octagram spiral, which gives you that cool spiral look. I have the bottom surface pattern, again in that same octagram spiral, and then I have the inside set to that as well with the dense sparse infill density set to that as well, although I don't honestly think the pieces get thick enough that it's a big deal. But those are actually the changes that I make so that that pattern is consistent all the way. So that's really the only changes I made. Everything else, speed-wise, all of that looks the same. On occasion, if I'm doing some with particularly little pieces and I'm having trouble with them staying on as a result, I will go in and sort of throw a brim type in. I have it auto set, but sometimes it doesn't want to do it, so I will throw an outer brim on from time to time. But if you're having problems with things sticking on the plate, that is one way to do it. So, but if you go to slice the plate, you'll see that it does that. Filament, you'll see it's only changing 3 times. It's going to print, looks like it's going to do the red ones first, then the orange ones, then the yellow, and then the white. So pretty cool. So that is this plate. Over here, I've got my second plate. Now it's going to want to try and do the auto spiral pattern for this one again, and I don't want that. So what I need to do is go over into prepare, and then I'm actually going to take this object and I'm going to change these over here, and I'm just going to go back to the originals, which were, if I remember correctly, the top surface pattern is monotrophic, the bottom surface pattern is monotrophic, the internal pattern is rectilinear, and then rectilinear as well. And that should be everything for at least the, changing it so that it looks normal and it doesn't have the octagram pattern. Yep, so all of that's good. So the only other thing I need to do then is set my pause so that I'll be able to put my glass pieces in when it comes time to do that. So I will scroll down until I see my pause point, which is right before, it's going to be this one, right before this one. So you always put the pause right at the layer that it's going to start changing. So I'm going to add a pause there, and it should pause where I need to so that I can put my glass pieces in. But first, I am going to print out my glass pieces. So I went over to Amazon and honestly just got some transparent PLA. You can get transparent PETG from Bambu Studio, and it's probably also available on Amazon. I just haven't looked, but I like working in PLA, so I kept it that way. I might have engaged in a little bit of rainbowitis with it, but I got a lot of cool colors. So I'm going to go ahead and get my machine loaded up, and we will get this plate printed, and then I will show you the process for loading it into the frame hereafter. there you have it, a little stained glass sun moon catcher with kind of a floral effect. Now, like I said, you can take this design and this application and really expand it and create all sorts of possibilities. Like I said, I have my bigger design here that I created, and this one I really played around with. There's actually two different thicknesses that I've got, so that I've got sort of the bigger frame. I think that's the 4mm, and then these are 3mm, and you can do, you know, super tiny pieces of glass in there. You can play around with colors, of course. There's all sorts of transparent ones. I will leave a link to the colors below that I've used. This one, I'm trying to remember what brand this is, but this was obviously this was pink, white, blue, and yellow. The same yellow and white that I used in this one was also used here in the sun catcher, which I do know for a fact all of these are the Sunlu brand transparents. They have like a really good set of primaries, but I know when I was creating this one, I wanted some additional pink and purple, and I think I also picked up a couple of blues as well. So it's not too bad in terms of pricing for transparent PLA, but I really like how these turned out, and I think there's a lot of possibilities with these. And if these designs feel a little rigid, like very, you know, sharp points and all of that, keep in mind, depending on how you create the frame, you can make it feel as organic as you want. One of the things, especially having struggled with Affinity Designer and getting shapes and designs to look right, I think the same method that I use when I'm creating my pins, where I take the design that I've drawn in Procreate and then basically just convert that black and white shape over to an SVG, which you can do with the live trace function in Illustrator, and from there create the offset lines that you need for the Suncatcher design. So I hope that you guys found this information interesting. I hope this will help you kind of create new projects. It's one of these that I've been playing with for quite a while, and I finally figured out how to do it, and then it was like, okay, I need to figure out how to make this simple enough to explain, because it broke my brain a little bit initially, but I've kind of gotten all the kinks ironed out, and I was able to show you guys the easiest way to do this. Basically, creating your frame, offsetting roughly 0.4 to 0.6 for your glass pieces, and then adding another 0.2 for a gap between the frame and the glass. And by the way, if you don't necessarily want to 3D print the glass like I did here, you could very easily take this exact same SVG DXF file over to whatever laser cutting software you're using and have the red lines that you have saved out, the glass pieces, be the ones that you cut out of acrylic. And then it's just the same process, where once it gets to the point where it's ready for the pieces to be inserted into the 3D printer, instead of inserting the 3D printed glass pieces, you insert the acrylic in its place. And that'll give you an even more glass look, if you're really, especially if you're really looking for that transparent effect. I didn't have very much transparent acrylic hanging around, and it wasn't in my budget, although I do have a neat idea for what I can do with some white acrylic that I've got in regards to this, and I will probably do a follow-up video with that. If you like this content, by all means, hit the like button and the subscribe button to tell the Eldritch algorithm that this video is a good one, this channel is a good one. I was really excited to hit 3.6K subscribers. It's hard to believe that I started this channel just under 2 years ago, and how much growth I've seen in the last couple of years. And I'm really excited to be able to share all of my stuff, and I couldn't have done all of this without your guys' support. In the meantime, have a good day. Bye.